Hi guys. Hi, how are you? Happy Friday. Friday of a long weekend. Yay! I hope you're doing well and welcome to today's podcast and video. So today, like most days, I'm talking to you about something that's very near and dear to my heart, something that means a lot to me, and something that I had to learn the hard way. So hopefully you don't have to learn the hard way. Hopefully my talk today can help you recognize your own power and you can really step into it. So today we're going to be talking about how there is power in your past. And really, when you think about it, that can mean two very different things. And we will talk about both. But the first is that the past, if you allow it, can hold the power over you. It can keep you in chains. It can just hold power over you as long as you will let it. The second, kind of more upbeat meaning of that is that you can take back your power. So the power that comes from the past for you can come in the fact that you have overcome what you've overcome and that you've used it to build your future. So I want to talk to you about that today. I want to talk to you about my own experience with denying my past, with letting it have a power over me, and then my own experience with what happens when you take back your power. So as some of you probably already know, if you've been following along on Facebook or Instagram, any of my social media accounts, or if you listened to the first podcast episode of the Hidden Moments Lifestyle podcast, then you probably already know that I have a past that includes a very rough year. So I'll go into a little bit more detail on that, and then I'm going to talk about the impact that that had on me for so long, even after I thought I had already healed myself. So when I was 16, I experienced a trauma, and it completely left me just in a tailspin. I became very depressed. I hated my life. I didn't want to be here. I was self-harming daily. I was just completely depressed. I couldn't see a way out. The idea of having any kind of a future to me just seemed completely unrealistic. And I didn't see a way out. I didn't think I would ever get out of that really dark place. And fortunately, obviously I did, but it took a lot of healing. And so I remember one day standing in the bathroom at my husband's house. He was my boyfriend at the time. And I remember thinking to myself, I could end it. I could stop all of this. I could end it right here, and I wouldn't have to feel this pain anymore. And then in that moment, I realized that it wasn't that I wanted life to end. I didn't want to die. I didn't want my life to end. I wanted the pain to end. And so in that moment, I decided before I go and do something that I can't undo, maybe I need to exhaust absolutely every possibility of how to make this pain end. And so that for me was a hugely pivotal moment where I decided that I was going to do everything in my power to try and get better. And so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about how I did that, because I think that's the kind of thing where you really do need professional help. But for me, I did get some help. I did help myself. I did incorporate a lot of practices into my life that really helped me turn things around. And I took the time to heal. And I really do mean that. It did take a long time for me to heal from that place, but I was able to do it. And so years later, I had reached a point in my journey where I was so far from that feeling, from that depression, from feeling that rock bottom, that I didn't even identify with being that person anymore. And so I think partly because I didn't identify that way, I saw myself as an optimist, and partly also because maybe a little bit of a self-preservation thing, I didn't even want to acknowledge that that was part of my past. I just wanted to move on. I wanted to forget that it had ever happened, and I didn't want to acknowledge it at all. So I didn't talk about it. I never talked about it. There were probably a select couple of people in my life who knew that I had been in that place. But other than that, I really didn't talk about it because at the time I didn't think it served me. I didn't think it would serve anybody else. I didn't see a purpose in talking about it. And even within myself, I didn't even see a purpose of acknowledging that it happened. I kind of just saw it as that was another life. That was another person. That wasn't me. I'm cutting the timeline here and starting over. And so I did that for quite a while. I thought it was working for me, but then things would kind of start to creep in. And so things would happen where I would get a little reminder of who I was back then, of what I experienced back then. And I think a perfect example is that because at the time I was self-harming, I had scars on my arm. And so I reached a point where I was embarrassed to wear short sleeves. And I would worry that when I wore short sleeves, someone would see the scars on my arm, they would assume something, I would have to explain myself, and it just became this fear that I had that someone was going to see that, make an assumption about me, and that I wouldn't be able to adequately convince them that I was no longer in that rock bottom place. And so this became a fear for me. And it crept in other little ways as well. But I think that's just a really good example of something that was kind of lingering, that was reminding me of this past that I had been so diligently trying to deny. And so the fact that I was so heavily trying to remove myself from that, trying not to identify with the experience that I had back then, it started to kind of eat away at me a little bit. And I started to feel a little bit out of alignment. And I didn't really understand why, because I felt like, I'm never going back there. So why do I have to acknowledge it? Why does it mean anything to me? And the reality is, when we pretend that something didn't happen, when we pretend that we don't have a past, we are denying two parts of ourselves. The first is that we're denying the fact that we had that experience. And although you may have moved on, and that was my reality, I had moved on, I was still denying the part of me that had that traumatic experience and the part of me who was in that very dark place. And so I was feeling as though those were two separate entities, when the reality is they're part of an entire person. And the second part that I realized was that I was also denying the person who had overcome all of those things. And so when I think about where I am now, when I think about this incredible life that I've built that I absolutely love, I built that because I started out in that rock bottom place and I learned how to overcome it. And then I learned from there how to actually thrive. And so by denying my past, by denying my experience, I was also denying the part of me that had worked so hard to overcome. And so those are two really important pieces of the person that I am today. And denying those parts of myself meant that I was leaving this piece of me that was kind of eating away at me because I wasn't accepting my whole self. And to really come from a place of self-love and self-compassion and authenticity, I had to overcome my fear that someone might think down on me, or someone might judge me, or even that I was judging myself. And so to really become authentic, I had to acknowledge that past, and I had to take back my power. And so as soon as I did that, as soon as I decided that that was a part of me that I was willing to acknowledge, that that part of me existed, that I had experienced those things, and that my overcoming that situation had led me to be the person that I was today, that really freed me. It freed me from the chains that were holding me back. And they were chains that I didn't even know existed for the longest time. But as soon as they were gone, I felt this insane relief that, oh my goodness, I am free to just be myself and acknowledge my entire self and everything I've been through. And it was a really incredible experience for me. And what I found as well was that when I started being really open about my experiences, I was met with nothing but positive, supportive, and loving people. And that's not to say that will always be the case. At some point, I may encounter someone who doesn't understand, or who, for whatever reason, is in a point on their journey where they just can't quite reconcile that information, that part of me. And that's okay too, because the reality is that we want to surround ourselves with people who are in our corner, who aren't going to judge us, who are going to make us feel good about our whole selves. And so it's okay if I encounter someone who doesn't understand that part of me, because I know that I'm living my truth and that I'm going to attract the people that I need in my life. So it was a very freeing experience for me to really accept that that had happened, accept that I overcame, and that that kind of in some ways built who I am today. And even more than that, the experience of actually becoming authentic, living my full truth, it really helped me become a better coach as well. It really helped me to be able to live from a place of very deep self-love, to help draw that out in other people and be very deeply compassionate as well, and then teach that to my clients as well. So it really strengthened that side of me as well. And, you know, a little bit on the lighter side too, as I've said several times, and I'll probably say for the rest of my life, I now consider myself to be a forever optimist. And that is just part of who I am now. It's the way I see the world. It's my perspective. It's just who I am. But when I would talk to people, or people would come to me and they would say like, oh, I saw that you did this thing. Like, how did you do that? Or how did you maintain your optimism in this situation? Like, I don't understand. How did you stay so positive? And I used to just say like, it's a choice. It's a choice to be positive. And then people would say to me like, no, like, you have always been naturally positive. Like, what do I do if I'm not a naturally positive person? What do I do if I'm a negative person? And then I would say, no, it's a choice. Being positive is a choice. Your perspective, your mind, the way you're thinking, it is a choice, and you have to own that. And people just didn't understand that there was this point in my life where I wasn't just naturally positive. They thought that I was always that way. And because at the time I wasn't willing to share my whole self, I wasn't willing to share what had happened in the past and how I had overcome things and built my mindset, because that is what you do. You build your mindset over the years. Because I wasn't willing to share that with people, they didn't see me as being credible when I told them it is a choice. You have to choose it every single day. And then I would get frustrated because people weren't understanding that I wasn't just coming from this already, privileged position of just naturally having that mindset. I had started at the bottom with absolutely no positive thoughts whatsoever, and I learned how to become an optimist. And so once I was actually willing to share my whole self, to be completely authentic, to acknowledge the impact that my past had on me and how I used it to fuel my success, to fuel my positivity, at that point, people were starting to be able to relate to me so much more when I tried to tell them there are tools, there are ways that you can change your perspective. So it became so much more of a powerful conversation with people when they would come to me for help on how to be positive or on how to change their mindset, because I could very clearly acknowledge, maybe we're not going through exactly the same thing. Maybe we didn't go through the exact same thing. Our paths might be different. You might have gone through something different than what I went through. However, I understand some of the emotions behind that. I understand what it's like to be stuck. And this is how I got out, and this is how you can use that to help you. So there really is a power in owning your truth. There's a power in your past, and if you choose to, you can take that power for yourself and use it to your advantage. And so that is my call to action for all of you today. Regardless of what you've gone through, regardless of what you're going through, I send you nothing but love, and also just plea and ask of you to take your power back, to recognize that power is yours for the taking. If you leave it, if you don't take back your power, then your past will hold that power over you. It will keep that power. It will pull you down. But if you decide to take back your power from your past, own your story, and really truly use it to help build your future, you can do anything. And there is true power in that. Yeah, so I hope that resonates with you. I hope that it makes sense. I didn't make any notes for myself today because I really just wanted to share from the heart. But I truly do believe everything that I said. I truly do believe that there is power in taking back your past, owning it, and acknowledging every single part of yourself, acknowledging that you are this whole person who has had all of these incredible experiences. And when I say incredible, I don't necessarily mean it in a positive way, but every experience you have, it does build who you are as a person, and how you choose to use that experience is up to you. So I encourage you, make the choice today and take back your power. Bye, guys.